What's that validation? What's that dopamine kick that kicks in and people commit? And Zillow's dopamine was Zestimate, right? People want to know what their house is worth compared to the neighbor or compared to the area or whatever, right? So when all of a sudden you go to Zillow and you can now see the value of your home, well, guess what you're going to do right away? Start looking up your neighborhood.
Hey, my name is Sharran Srivatsaa, and I'm here with my partner and friend, Pritesh Damani, and we are here with the inaugural episode of the SuperApp podcast. Now, the best part about this is doesn't matter if you're a real estate agent, a mortgage broker, a coach, a consultant, if you're related to the real estate industry in any way, you should be thinking about this main idea that we call the SuperApp. Everybody wants to build the SuperApp, and we're going to unpack to you everything that it takes. Every person that it is working on, trying to figure out this at a small scale or a large scale, what this idea of the super app is and how it's going to change not only your life, but consumers' life and the industry forever. This is the Super App podcast, and I want to kick it off with a big question for Pritesh right now. Dude, we talk about this thing called the super app. What makes a super app?
You know what? Before I answer that, I just want to say, we've talked about this podcast for 6 months. We got to do this, we got to do this. And I'm glad we're doing this. And I think between me and you, it feels like we'll have a unique perspective. And even though, we might not talk about something specific, I think I have a feeling that there's some value that can be added, just people can listen to this in their car and just enjoy the talk. And maybe pick up a couple of nuggets that a different perspective, right? But going back to the super app, I mean, it's crazy, right? I think it's 10 years or more. People are trying to build this one app that solves everything. And it feels like it's just this mythical quest to the super app is what we call it, right? Where you constantly are improving something, but this industry is so convoluted that the definition of super app on its own is a thing on its own, right? It's hard to define what a super app is, right? If you ask me, or go ahead, you were saying something.
Yeah, I was gonna. So that's that. So everyone's thinking the same thing as you and I are right now. They're thinking, well, what is this super app? I've heard this terminology before. I've heard, a couple of different industries use it. Do you believe that there is a super app that exists in a different industry? Is Amazon a super app?
I think WeChat is a super app, right? Because Amazon, you can buy a lot of shit on Amazon, right? You can buy different kinds of things on Amazon, but it kind of stops at purchasing things. Of course, there's a hidden business of retargeting and advertising and of course all of that kind of stuff. But WeChat, on the other hand, is a mix. It's purchasing. You're buying things. You're chatting with your friends. You're shopping on WeChat in this giant messenger, which is what Elon wants to do in the United States, right? With X. I think that's kind of it. WeChat, in my mind, is closer to the real estate super app than Amazon is to purchasing, if that makes sense. Because in real estate, if you think about it, you are looking for a home, which is the Zillows of the world. They did a good job at search, right? You are doing once you go to purchase, there's the madness of contract management, transaction management, loans, mortgages, title, home insurance, and I'm scratching the surface and all the things that go in the middle. Scheduling software so that you can go look at your home, or messaging with your clients, the agents talking to the clients saying, hey, let's meet at 6 p.m. Organization around that, right? Open house viewing. There's so much little detail that goes into it, and there are different aspects of this software that needs to come together in a magical way, and everybody needs to commit to it, right? Which is the hardest part in this industry.
So what? And I think that we know that there's people making innovations in the real estate industry have said, here is the 97 things that happen just on the transaction side, not on anything else. Here's the 97 things that happen. I'm making up a number. We're going to go attack one piece of it. That's why you have so many different providers, and the average kind of agent and client's tech stack is so complex. The average client's tech stack to find a home is so complex right now. My wife has 3 apps and receives 6 or 7 IDX based emails, and we're not even actively looking for a home. So I'm trying to figure out consolidation where you're seeing big companies like Zillow buy a CRM system. Well, the CRM system is not even client facing. And so it's fascinating for somebody to say, hey, on my search for being a super app, I'm going to go buy a CRM system that doesn't interact with my client in any way. I'm just buying it for maybe the revenue, maybe the data, maybe the agent intelligence. So now there's this underpinning, underlayer of the things that are like, hey, there's the front facing of what a super app does. And then there's the background of all that companies want to buy it for from a data perspective too, which I'm trying to figure out, Pritesh. I don't know where it starts and where it ends. So what is the scope of a super app?
Depends on who's asking, right? So just for our viewers, you use the word IDX. Maybe you can spend a little bit talking about what an IDX is.
Yeah, so for if you're not in the real estate industry, every broker owns their own data. And because the broker owns their own data, there's no way for other agents, other consumers, other websites to get access to the data. So the brokers enter into an agreement that says, hey, we will actually give you our data so that we can get more exposure to this. So all the agents and all the data bodies like the MLSs, et cetera, say, hey, we'll all sign an agreement that we will preserve the data, preserve the integrity, and we will give you kind of recognition that it's your that you own this. But we're gonna make sure everybody in the world gets to see this. So you trade exposure because you're getting the exposure for control, and that's the cost you're paying for it. But in that's what we used to promise to our clients that, hey, we'll get more exposure to your listing. So that's why most people are okay with that. But that again is that data feed has been around for so long, and how does it fit into this overall ecosystem of what a super app is?
Yeah, I mean, see, right here, you just pointed out something that makes it even more complex. How many IDXs or MLSs exist? More than 600, right? 600, 700. So you got to negotiate, with all of these people to even get a complete data feed of all the properties that exist in the United States, right? So if you wanted to make an app and you just wanted to do the perfect property search listing, right? Best of luck. You're dead on arrival. It's dead on arrival, right? Like you're not going to negotiate with 600 people, 600 or 700, whatever sources, different sources are, right? Because you have to justify the licensing cost. You'll be like, oh, how many buyers exist in Missouri, middle of nowhere, right? Like 2, do I want to pay even $1,000 a month for that data feed? Right, as a company doing this, right? Yeah, how do you justify this? And then all of a sudden you find yourself in like, you have an app that doesn't even have all the properties. And guess what happens? Your agent goes to the buyer and says like, hey, use my app. And they go, you don't have all the properties. And you've got friction. So dead on arrival, right? Zillow did a great job because they negotiated years ago when people didn't understand .com in many ways, right? Got all the rights and kind of trumped the innovation on that side. I mean, I give them kudos. Like, they figured it out. They knew that they could do a better job at search. They negotiated the rights in a way that nobody understood how it would get used in the future. And now, if your house is not on Zillow, like it doesn't matter if it's on MLS or not, it's not getting sold.
Great. So let's talk about this one. Zillow is more searched than the term real estate right now. When someone wants to see a home, they literally are like, hey, what does Zillow say it's worth? Or let me go check it out on Zillow. Even if you use the other apps, it's I always make this distinction that in the South, when you're in Atlanta and you go to a restaurant, they say, hey, what kind of Coke would you like? Sprite. So like for them, every soda is Coke, right? And I think that almost every quote major portal is a Zillow. Hey, what, do you use Zillow? Like check it out on Zillow. And so a lot of folks out there, both brokerages and technology companies, some of them are like, hey, I don't like Zillow because they pay, they charge agents money or what have you. But you talk about this the other day and you said something about why you don't want to compete with Zillow at their game. And I thought that was really, really interesting. You're like, hey, why don't we go compete with Zillow? If they have search locked down, don't we have better innovation now? Why can't we go compete with that gateway to the super app?
Well, I mean, this is the great part, right? Like ideally a super app would have an amazing property search, right? But what makes an amazing property search? Have all the properties on the platform first, right? That's one. But 2 is if, Zillow is an established brand name. It's like the same example that you said with Coke. So now you have to go and like change 100 million people have it, like a brand recognition in place to say, okay, it's not Zillow, it's XYZ, right? It's a new app that does something better. That switch happens, and you can see how it's happening in AI right now. And maybe we can talk about AI in our next episode or something, but like it's happening in AI right now. All of a sudden, Google was this dominant player for 15 years, and all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, I can just ask a question to an AI system. It will just give me an answer instead of giving me like search results, right? So you can see this massive shift happening really fast. And of course, Google is innovating. So I'm not saying Google is going to get replaced by an AI system, but if they don't, it will get replaced, right? So you have to have this 0 to 1 leap in innovation for people to change behavior, right? Like all of a sudden people are willing to ask an AI system an answer that they can't get directly from traditional Google search, right? So the question to ask ourselves is, are we going to be able to make a 0 to 1 leap in property search? Like, how can I show some meaningful property search in a 0 to 1 that's so different that people will be like, oh my God, this is just like next level. This is the one I'm going to use, right? Property search at the end of the day, it's like, what do you call it? Like property porn, right? People just like want to just look at pictures because there's envy around, a certain amount of envy around wanting that house that you don't have. And it's fun to look at it. They've nailed that interface, right? Yeah, you can make the interface a little bit different, but if it's not 0 to 1, how do you go to 100 million people and say, change your behavior?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's like my take. Like I don't fundamentally believe that I can build something that will be so much better that it's worth the investment. That's what I was thinking about.
Well, let's talk about the investment thing. I think, so we talk to agents, other brokerages, other innovators in the space all the time. And both you and I have done both the business side and the technology building side. And the one thing that I've learned a lot is that the hardest part of building technology and innovation is prioritization. It's what are you going to choose to build? Like you and I don't have any shortage of things that we want to build. Like we have a list that is so big that we want to build. We just have to figure out priorities around these things. So that's kind of number one. And I'd love for you to answer it in two ways. The second is, maybe you start with this. I bet that you more than I bet that you have built stuff that either never got used or never saw the light of day. Right? How much stuff have you built that you're like, man, I thought this would work, but I built it and it was not a primary feature. And I think that I want people to realize that there's so much that gets built with a vision in mind that never gets used. And then there's so much that we want to build that we don't have time to build. And this is the big dichotomy, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, I say this all the time. The younger you are, the more time you have. You know what I mean? Because you start valuing time as you get older. Because it's also how your mind works, right? Like, I don't have like scientific proof around it, but I have a feeling that your mind identifies time as it passes through time, right? So now that I'm 40, I have 40 years behind me. So every year that passes by, it's 1/40th. Versus if you are 20, you're 1/20th. It's more time, right? The ratio is more. So when you're younger, like if you have to answer your question, like I think the curve would look like something like this, like 80% of the things I built when I was 26 or 28 were not used, right? And only 20% of the things were used because you were young, stupid, and adventurous, and like you're willing to take more risk, right? So you end up building a bunch of stuff, especially if you're like, oh, it's like, let me just build it. It's like a few hours or whatever. And then you realize the value of time. And then now we're where we are, like, like we're happy to where we are, but like we still value our time. And you say, okay, now that I have a smaller ratio, what's the biggest bang for the buck? What's the most likely thing that's going to work? And that's what tunes your mind, right? So everyday decisions are what's the most likely or the most valuable decision, right?
So why is the reason this super app or this concept of a super app is so hard to build? Is it because we don't have a sense of what that North Star is? Or is it because to build a super app just takes too much time, just takes unlimited resources? What is the reason? Why is it so hard to build?
It's a combination of three things, two which you mentioned. And the third one is, I would say, grit over multiple people. I'll explain what that means. So first is obviously it's a big piece, right? Like you can't go at it all at the same time. So you kind of have to have your own blueprint. Zillow has a blueprint, like they want to go step by step. They have a master plan. They're probably executing it, right? Second is like, is it too expensive? I think it's probably not too expensive if you have the right people. I think most companies struggle with this invisible thing. This is my theory. Most companies struggle with this invisible thing where people are transiting. They are not going from point A to point B. They're like, if a train is leading from point A to point B, they're getting on and off the train along the way. So you could have like a big executive that joins a company and says like, okay, I'm going to help the super app. 3 years later, they get a different job. And like the whole thing is left in the middle, even though all the people who are executing the strategy are there, but the new executive now has to come in and pick up where they left and agree with all the decisions that were made. And you know how that goes. Like rarely someone comes in and says, yep, that's perfect. Let's pick it up.
Rarely you and I agree sometimes. I mean, and we are on the same page all the time, right? And we struggle. And that's what makes prioritization hard and easy, because if you and I agree on something, we know that needs to get bumped to the top of the list.
It's like when we have those magical moments where we're like, dude, this is an automatic. It's not, it's like a 20-second conversation and it just goes race to the top, and everybody else like doesn't even get to argue whether it makes sense or not, right? Like it's like an automatic, right? But again, going back, let me ask you this question. What in your opinion makes it so hard to build a super app? Even from a business standpoint, like what is your, like, you know, the industry more than most, I think.
Two things. One is not knowing how to sell it along the way. Because a lot of times we're going to build the pieces, and maybe you can talk about your Lego blocks kind of thinking around this, but I don't think you can show people the bigger vision, they don't get it. But when you show them the pieces of how you're getting there, they don't think it's good enough. So now you're stuck in this constant of, I don't see it, it's not good, it's not a big enough vision, even though you know it's big enough, because it seems really simplistic when you say we're going to build this. And then you build these pieces along the way, and then they're like, what the heck is this? And so now maybe an investor or a stakeholder, you got to constantly sell them that this is along the path. And if you don't get buy-in along the way, you don't buy yourself enough time to build that thing. And I think, going back to Zillow, they did a really good job by saying, hey, we're just going to go after search and Zestimate. We're not going to do anything else, right? They nailed it when they launched. They were like, hey, you can find your home, you can find the value of any home in America. They actually didn't even care that it was wrong, because it being wrong actually got them more search traffic, right? Which is amazing. So they were able to, I think, show progress along the way. You and I, even at Real, you and I struggle with showing progress along the way, because someone's like, well, I don't know why you guys are building that. And to me, from a selling the idea and the vision perspective, I think it's hard to sell the thing along the way. And I think that's the job of the entrepreneur here. But the hardest part for me is a very personal thing. I'm just super impatient. I just want it right now. I'm like, let's go. Like, why can't we have it right now?
I 100% agree. And let's go back to the Zestimate thing, right? And like this also is like another ingredient, right? In order to be the quest for the super app, you got to get, like you said, validation along the way. But what's that validation? What's that dopamine kick that kicks in and people commit? And Zillow's dopamine was Zestimate, right? People want to know what their house is worth compared to the neighbor or compared to the area or whatever, right? So when all of a sudden you go to Zillow and you can now see the value of your home, well, guess what you're going to do right away? Start looking up your neighborhood, right? And then start telling your friends, oh my God, did you see this valuation? Like, oh, Zillow is telling me my house is worth more than what I think it's worth. Or the opposite. Like you said, even if it's less, you're now upset and you're like searching more. Why is my value less? And all of a sudden you created this sticking point, and they branded it really well, right? Where everybody's like arguing with our agents about the value of their home because Zillow randomly put a number up there, right? So, but I think that was their kickoff. I think they of course did the search really well, but the Zestimate just really freaking put the nail in the coffin, like where everybody was just like, what's the Zestimate?
Yeah, I actually believe that if you had taken that, what is the biggest difference between Zillow and, for those that are familiar with, an IDX feed, or where someone just sends you properties? Like a lot, if you're a consumer and you get different properties from agents on a property search, you just get access to homes and access to homes available, but it's without any thinking around what that value may be. And I think that's where Zillow won, right? Both what that was live and the homes that were not live, because every home listing that is live on the market has a price attached to it, some kind of list price, and every home that is not on the market was just blank. And I think Zillow fixed that. That was the key, because now they put a price on every single home in America. And as soon as they did that, that changed the way we think about real estate.
Yeah. Well, not only that, they also, in many ways, democratize information, right? So what does that mean? Like, I go to Zillow Home right now and I can see like property history, right? So I can see a home that's being up for sale for like, say, 2.7 million today was bought for 2 million 2 years ago in a high market. And like now I'm asking myself, in a low market, why is this property priced at 2.7? Am I just losing it, or this seller is the loser, right? But all of a sudden, like, seems like Zillow and like a few other .coms are the only people who can answer this thing, right? And these are the little building blocks toward the quote unquote super app. But the super app vision is so big that it feels like nothing is happening, but slowly things are getting done, right?
Here's an interesting thing that I'd love your take on, right? In the real estate industry, with the quest for this mythical super app, every single innovation that has been put forward has a core agent component to it. If you started with Zillow, they have agents advertising, they have Zillow Flex, they hand agents the leads, they do all of that. The iBuyers, when they started out, they still needed the agents to either value the property or turn around and sell the properties. We had flat fee brokerages like Purple Bricks and Rex, and who tried to do the flat fee. They were bankrupt in 24 months, but they still needed the agent. Redfin, they moved from a salary model, even though they had technology, but they needed the agent to sell it in some way. Everything is centered around the human component of the agent to marshal this transaction, this complex transaction. Here's a crazy stat. In 2001, 66% of buyers actually worked with an agent on the buy side. In today, 88% of purchases have agents on the buy side, right? This is an NAR stat. Now, assume that those stats are accurate. In a 25-year period, roughly, when it's been the boom of technology, when data has been completely democratized, when every consumer knows exactly what they're getting, you would assume that that number would be the other way. What we have seen is that the utilization of the human component of the agent is actually even more now than it was then, even when we have more information. So this whole theory that just because you have more information doesn't mean you don't need an agent is false, because the data shows us. And I think there's a second reason, and I'm curious about your thinking on this. I'm thinking about the human reason behind it. And the human reason I think behind it is the purchase or sale of a home is an infrequent transaction in someone's life, while it is also a high dollar amount transaction, one of the highest that they are transacting. And if they're going to sell on average 3 to 4, sell or buy 3 to 4 times in their lifetime, they're like, listen, I just want somebody to kind of manage this entire process for me. There's no reason to get into the complexity of this. And so my question for you, Pritesh, is how much of this super app ties into the human component?
A lot, right? Like, this is the key. So, if you, and again, like, there's no stat backing this, but like a gut feeling backing this, property prices rocketed over the last 20 years, right? If you're buying anywhere from like $500,000 to $2 million purchase, this is the most expensive purchase of most people's lives, right? Most people are buying homes, first time, second time, but we know that people buy every 7 years or something, right? So either they're buying the second home, or the second, sell their home and buy the next one, or they're buying the very first home. The process changes at least a little bit every few years, right? The form change, the contract change. The smartest people, me and you both know, will not want to sign this contract and analyze it themselves, right? They'll be like, oh, I don't know what I don't know, and I'm about to buy a $2 million home. I don't know what I don't know. I'm about to buy a $500,000 home, right? The pain is the same, and the risk tolerance for that, from that perspective, is the same. Doesn't matter $500,000 or $2 million or $10 million, right? There is a risk component attached to it. You don't know what you have to ask. You don't know what you need to know. You're not going to sign the contract on your own. You need that human counsel where someone else is like, I'm an expert. And honestly, even if they're not an expert, you want to hear that they're an expert, right? Hopefully you hire somebody who's an expert. And then 2 is they will help you saying this contract is negotiated for you. These are the exclusions. These are the inclusions. You need to think about this. What do you want to do about the about the easement on your property. Most people don't even know what an easement is, like that kind of stuff. So yeah, we can make an argument about whether we need an agent or not, but I think people underestimate the value an agent provides, right? So going back to the super app, if your thought process as a company is, okay, we're going to displace the agent, I think it's like, it is novel and it is future thinking, but buying a home is not the same as buying a toothpaste on Amazon. You can't go wrong on this. You got to live with this thing, you know?
Yeah. What is for industry professionals, the real estate agent, the mortgage broker, the CEO of a real estate company, the CEO of technology companies, when they see out there that, hey, Zillow made this acquisition based on the super app, CoStar made this acquisition to build this portfolio of products. You have this little arms race going on where there've been a couple of big conglomerates that have come up over time, and they said, hey, I'm going to buy as many of these companies as possible, and I'm going to have my portfolio look like the collection of my portfolio is my super app. What do you think about a portfolio of companies or services being the super app versus the super app being the super app?
Well, this is the most challenging piece about this industry. So there are at least tens or if not hundreds of companies that have done acquisitions and like tried to go to a super app, whether it's a technology.com or whether it's a brokerage, right? And the problem is that, again, it goes back to my point A to point B train travel. The executive who made the acquisition is no longer there to duct tape this together. So they don't bring it home. So you've got like acquisitions after acquisitions that are happening. They kind of live in isolation. These teams are different. They're not married. Their incentives die off. And all the original founders go off their merry way. They have no incentive to work together. The golden handcuffs are gone. And you've got these pieces of technology that I think the strategy in place is a good strategy. They have the good ideas like that. Oh, we're going to put this together. Of course, it's supposed to work, right? But the problem is the people are gone. So it's always about like, how do you keep the original people incentivized and keep them and not like let them go and start a new company? I think that's one. And two is it's about the experience. Your consumer doesn't, the borrower or the home buyer doesn't actually care whether you have 5 apps or one. They just want to download one app, right? And they need to have one experience. They need to have one way of talking to your team, whether it's your loan officer or whether it's your title escrow agent or whether it's your agent or whether it's your customer service person. They need to have a unified way of talking to them. And the process needs to be simplified, right? That's the other piece of this thing. So I think that's like kind of a short answer of like, I think it's a combination of experience plus like a non-duct taped technology, right? And this is like the problem with the industry, in my opinion.
Do you think a company to build a mini super app or a major super app or a good app, whatever a good product is, do you think a company has to start, like, have the technologies changed so much or the people changed so much or the industry changed so much or the vision changed so much that a newer company starting today, do they have a better advantage? Or does someone started 10 years ago, can they still morph and get there?
It doesn't take too many people to build beautiful technology. I don't think it's about money. I will give you an example. WhatsApp, $16 billion acquisition across any device you can think of. Like the flip phone to the most advanced features, it was 16 people total, right? It's like, how driven are these people? What's their grit on them? And what's their motivation and like their drive, right? I don't think it's like the dollars that's going to I mean, of course you need some money, but I don't think you need like $100 million, $200 million. Like, I really don't think that's what you need to build a beautiful super app. But a lot has to go with beyond just building. Like, as you know, build and they will come. You have to have a strategy that plays along the way, right? You have to have something that delivers value along the way, like you said earlier, right? Because people are not patient by definition. So in our business, you know how much leeway we have, and you don't show progress, all of a sudden you're not moving forward. That's basically it, right? So you kind of have to it's hard to stitch a story, it's hard to tell a story, but if you're making a little progress at a time and you still have that end goal, and you might not even explain it to people, you might not talk about your end goal, you say we're launching a consumer app or whatever, like our super app, But as long as like you're driven, I think it can be done. And I don't think it's cost or capital or like how long have you been here. Unfortunately, I even think it might be even worse. The longer you've been here, you have like this tech debt that you've built, and like your technology has like actually like, worsened over time, and you're not using the latest stuff. You're not using the latest laws. You're not using the latest feeds or whatever, right? So it's probably more problems the longer it takes you.
So I want to kind of wrap up this episode with this one thinking that you've talked a lot about, and I think that if you could talk about this idea of these Lego blocks, and how you think about them, and I want to translate that to whoever's listening. So maybe you're a consumer, maybe you're a real estate agent. I want to maybe if you could talk about the Lego blocks and how it's worked so far, just at the stuff that we've built at Real. But then how does somebody listening say, okay, what does Lego blocks mean for me? I want to try to just piece that together, because then I think what we're giving folks is like, oh, I don't have to go build a buyer presentation. I can just build what I say on the first call. I don't have to go build an entire listing presentation. I have to just do this. I don't have to go build. I don't need $10,000 for my marketing on every listing. I just need to get the first 2 or 3 Lego pieces that I can stack on. So curious how you think about the Lego pieces, because I know that you would rather over-index and build more Lego pieces because you know that you can stack more on them in the future. So I'd love your kind of thinking around that.
This goes a little on the technical side, but let's play it out. So let's say you're doing SuperApp, right? The first thing you would be like, hey, I need some sort of property search. Like if you want to do the property search, right? So you say, I want you to come in and I want to search. In order to search that, right, you would need a login box and a sign up box. Like you need to sign up these users, right? So And as soon as you do that, you'll ask yourself, how many different kind of users do I have? Oh, I have agents, I have LOs, I have the borrower, the consumer, and 10 other types of users, right? Okay. So now you have this concept of roles, right? Like a role. And like as soon as you introduce that concept, now you're like, what kind of user can do what kind of stuff, right? So now you've got that. Now say you got to like the property search, you click on it. And now all of a sudden you want to talk to somebody. So you need like a WhatsApp like interface or like a Instagram messaging kind of interface, right? So all of a sudden you like in the interfacing thing, and now you're messaging. There are different kinds of messaging. You have text messaging. You're sending GIFs to each other. You have in that messenger you have a phone icon so you can call. Now all of a sudden you are doing VoIP like Twilio or Dialpad or whatever your favorite flavor is, and you're now all of a sudden building this phone stuff, right? And then all of a sudden you say, okay, now I need a way to like save this property. So you see how I'm building these little blocks, right? If you wait for your golden landing where you're going to like build this whole application soup to nuts, and I didn't even like start, like I just literally like didn't even get past the property search, right? Imagine mortgage, imagine title, imagine like home insurance, all this other stuff that needs to be plugged in, different feeds and hundreds of different things that come in. If we wait forever, you will never launch the SuperApp. That's what it means. Like it outlives us, right? But if you say, okay, I'm going to come up with like a 5-year or 6-year Lego block strategy, and they come in the right sequence. So to build anything, I need sign up and log in. To build any kind of conversation, I need a way for people to have like a chat-based interface, because we live in 2023. You don't email anymore, right? Okay. I need an instant way of talking to people because people want to talk to people. So you're starting to build these Lego blocks, and we put it in our system, and people start experiencing them in different ways. But once you build them, you start repurposing them. And all of a sudden your growth curves look like this, exponential, because you're launching a lot many products faster towards the end of it, because you've got to build up all these Lego blocks. The only requirement for this is the person who set up the strategy sits in the train all the way to point B, right? Because a new person jumping in, you got to like get aligned with the Lego block strategy, have the same motivation, same grit, the same everything to push the train forward, right? It's not impossible, but successful companies are made by people who have like incredible grit and are willing to give up under any sort of situation, right?
I think this is a great takeaway for folks, right? Which is, we started this topic of like, what the heck is a SuperApp? And I think that this is a great landing point for us, where the SuperApp is, you need a few pieces to this. You need people that are committed to staying with this process along the way, because otherwise when you have transition of people, you get transition of vision, and that it starts to fall apart. But then this idea of Lego blocks are so powerful that no one tells you about. They just think that you're just gonna go into a hole for 6 years and write. This is not like writing a book. Like people talk about writing a book as you write 450 words a day. Like that's a Lego block. Like you have to write these 450 words a day. And this brings me back full circle, Pritesh, because it makes me say, it gives me a better way of answering the question practically and mechanically, like not what the heck is a super app, but it's not just that, it's how do you build this? And I think that you cannot build this without a great vision, without great people, and without this idea of Lego blocks. Like you have to show progress along the way. Otherwise, even you and I don't have enough dopamine hits to continue along the path.
And I would add one more ingredient, which is trust, right? Because so much goes into building this that there needs to be incredible trust. Like, for example, between me and you and Tamir, me and Tamir, like that kind of stuff where we are not questioning every little step. We know that this person is going to push through this whole thing and get it to point B, right? But again, like I do think that if it's not the Lego block strategy, what ends up happening is you go into this 6-year dev cycle, which nobody should ever do. But if you do, by the time you are towards the end of your 6 years, the stuff that you built in year 1 or month 1 is already old and not working. It's a disaster. Technology doesn't work the same way as writing a book, right? So I think that's the other part around this thing.
Yeah. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you enjoyed the discussion of us trying to figure out what the heck is a super app, how you actually build something like this, why multiple companies have tried so hard and have gone with a portfolio strategy or a multi-year strategy, but most importantly, this idea of taking this Lego block principle and transferring it to your life and to your business as well. You may not need a super app day to day. You may not interact with the super app day to day, but you can totally build your own super app if you start with the Lego blocks.